життя українців. Wings for freedom. Wings for freedom. Шановні громадяни України.
Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave. On behalf of every father and every mother. Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors. And paves the way for a new history.
Dobry вечер. Good evening, afternoon, or morning, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to Tochnyi. On the 682nd day of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and 9 years and 10 months since Russia first invaded Ukraine at the Crimean Peninsula in 2014, Ukrainians continue to defend Europe and wider world security. Across Ukrainian society, including its surgical teams working under bombardment, as seen by many today, sacrifice, resistance, and loss continues. We are here, as always, to bring you analysis on topics regarding Ukraine's resistance and its mission to liberate all of its occupied territories. Tochnyi is, of course, a podcast on Spotify and Apple, amongst a range of other platforms. We also run a series of interviews named Tochnyi Talks, which has featured amongst its recent guests Dr. Mara Orgili, Sergei Sumleny, and Michael Weiss. We have another enticing program ahead for you today with a special guest, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, who runs the popular YouTube broadcast ATP Geopolitics. Mr. Pearce is also a columnist for Only Sky and a notable public speaker. He will be talking today to Erlands, Daniele, and others on a range of topics, one of which I'm sure will be Daniele's recent research into FPV drones and their combat use. So first up, it gives me a simple pleasure to hand over to Joseph.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So I will be, of course, reading the news this week, as I do. Last week we were on, we had a holiday break, a winter break, so we didn't report the news last week. Of course, a boat blew up. That was pretty neat. But I thought I would start on December 30th because it sort of feeds into some of the events that happened a little later. So starting with December 30th, the news report for the goings-on of Ukraine this week. On December 30th, explosions occurred in Belgorod, Russia, resulting in significant civilian casualties. Russian sources reported at least 25 deaths and over 100 injuries. Russian authorities allege that these explosions were the result of shelling by Ukrainian armed forces. They claim the use of Czech-made Vampire rockets and Vilka missiles fitted with cluster munition warheads for the attack. Ukraine, however, denied involvement in the incident. Ukrainian authorities instead attributed the explosions to malfunctioning Russian air defense systems, suggesting that falling fragments from intercepted missiles caused the damage. Some residents in Belgorod reported seeing air defense missiles rising into the sky, followed by explosions, supporting the Ukrainian claim of Russian air defense action. However, these accounts do not conclusively determine the source of the missiles that caused the damage in Belgorod. I would maybe just add that I would leave it at we're sort of waiting for Russia to provide any proof that Ukraine actually intentionally shelled civilian areas, and I doubt that would be forthcoming. Additionally, Ukrainian forces, as you can see on the footage here, from the military intelligence agency HUR, reported engaging in a cross-border raid on Russian positions in Belgorod Oblast, inflicting undisclosed losses. Incursions into this area have been reported multiple times since the beginning of the full-scale one that happened, I believe, in July. HUR shared a video showing parts of the assault, including the attack on a Russian platoon after mining a road in the area. The exact number of casualties from the operation is still being determined, according to their report. Ukrainian officials generally don't comment much on reports involving ground operations on Russian soil. Russian groups like Free Russia Legion and Russian Volunteer Corps have claimed involvement in the operation, but Ukrainian media sources as of yet have not independently identified any of these claims. So next item will be on January 1st. On January 1st, Russia launched a massive aerial terror attack across Ukraine, severely impacting the country's major cities, particularly Kyiv and Kharkiv. In Kharkiv, in northeastern Ukraine, the Russian onslaught involved a combination of drones and missiles. At least 28 people were injured as 6 missiles struck the city. Notably, Russian forces targeted residential buildings, hotels, medical facilities, and the headquarters of the Ukrainian security service in Kharkiv. The city officials reported extensive damage due to the attacks, indicating a deliberate focus on civilian infrastructure. That's what the civilian officials reported. The barrage of attacks killed at least 4 people and injured 92 across the entire country of Ukraine. In Kyiv, the capital was hit with Shahid drones, and there was also missiles for nearly 6 hours, resulting in significant destruction in residential areas and also infrastructure damage. Serhiy Popko, the head of Kyiv's military administration, confirmed casualties and destruction. Despite the onslaught, Ukraine's Air Force managed to intercept 35 drones launched by Russia. However, the debris from the downed missiles caused further damage to civilian facilities, disrupting essential services like gas, water, and electricity. Russian President Vladimir Putin expressed anger over what he alleged were Ukrainian strikes on the Russian city of Belgorod and vowed to intensify what I will say are terror attacks on Ukraine, but he just said attacks on Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky noted in a statement that since December 31st, Russia had already fired 170 Shahid drones and dozens of missiles into Ukraine, mostly targeting civilian areas. Zelensky expressed gratitude to international partners for their support in strengthening Ukraine's air defenses. And of course, we hope more of that will be forthcoming soon. On January 3rd, a landmark prisoner exchange occurred between Ukraine and Russia, facilitated by the United Arab Emirates, marking the largest such event since the full-scale invasion began. The exchange involved 230 Ukrainian and 248 Russian prisoners. 230 Ukrainian, 248 Russian, including both military personnel and civilians. The Ukrainian returnees comprised 130 POWs from the armed forces, including members from the Territorial Defense and Navy, 55 from the National Guard, 38 from the State Border Guard, 1 from the National Police, as well as 6 civilians. It included some defenders from Azovstal Steelworks in Mariupol. The exchange follows a long pause since the previous significant swap, which occurred in September of 2023, involving 215 military personnel, including 108 Azov battalion fighters and 10 foreign fighters. In 2023, there were a total of 49 prisoner exchanges, bringing 2,028 defenders back to Ukraine. President Zelensky, in an official statement regarding the exchange, noted the challenges in the exchange process, but did express optimism of future exchanges. On January 4th, the Ukrainian Air Force conducted significant operations in Crimea, targeting Russian military facilities. The Ukrainian Air Force reported that it had struck and destroyed a Russian command center at Saki Airfield on the occupied Crimean Peninsula in an overnight missile attack. Of course, Saki has been the site of a few attacks previously. Additionally, another military unit near the city of Yevpatoria was targeted in a separate strike on the peninsula. This action demonstrates Ukraine's continued capability to strike strategically important targets deep within occupied territory. There's some talk that this is maybe a missile. Definitely there were drones involved, but there was possibly a missile involved. I don't know if that's the case or not. If any of the commentators want to comment on that later, they're welcome to do so. Following the Ukrainian attacks, Russia reported that its air defense had downed a total of 36 Ukrainian drones over Crimea during the operation. Additionally, the Russia-installed governor of Sevastopol reported that 10 Ukrainian missiles were destroyed over the Crimean Peninsula. I don't think it was 10, by the way, by quote-unquote regular air defense means. While Russian claims are likely embellished, we can take them as confirmation that a significant Ukrainian operation did occur. On January 5th, the White House confirmed reports that North Korea recently provided Russia with ballistic missiles and launchers for use in Ukraine. According to declassified intelligence cited by White House official John Kirby, Russia launched at least one North Korean missile on December 30th, which landed in an open field in the Zaporizhzhia region. Additionally, multiple North Korean ballistic missiles were likely fired into Ukraine as part of a mass aerial attack, which was considered one of the largest missile attacks of the war. I mentioned that previously, the major attack on Kharkiv and Kyiv. The United States expressed significant concerns about this development, viewing it as a breach of a United Nations sanction against North Korea. The U.S. plans to raise the issue with the Security Council. U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, states that the U.S. believes North Korea sent Russia several dozen ballistic missiles, many of which were launched in the recent attack. John Kirby also mentioned that Russia is seeking to procure short-range ballistic missiles from Iran, indicating a broader effort by Russia to source more weaponry from their allies to continue prosecuting the invasion of Ukraine. Both Moscow and Pyongyang have previously denied all allegations related to weapons exchange when the White House presented evidence previously that North Korea had delivered more than 1,000 containers of military equipment and munitions to Russia, and again when evidence emerged of North Korean artillery shells being used by Russian forces in Ukraine. And I would add numerous Russian telegram posts complaining about how crappy they were. U.S. intelligence believes that North Korea, in exchange for its arms support, seeks from Russia to obtain aircraft, surface-to-air missiles, armored vehicles, ballistic missile production equipment, and other advanced technologies. However, there's been no official confirmation or details regarding any promises or arrangements made by Russia in return for these North Korean supplies. I mentioned in a previous news report, Gerasimov had gone to North Korea and announced a sort of partnership of some kind with North Korea, but again, very vague on the specifics, so we're not clear on like what North Korea gets out of this deal, whether it's just straight money or other promises have been made. Next item for January 5th, the International Atomic Energy Agency has reported being denied access to certain parts of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station, which is currently under Russian occupation. This development was highlighted by the head of the IAEA, who mentioned that their inspectors were currently restricted from accessing parts of the facility. Furthermore, as of the beginning of January 2024, the IAEA had not yet received the maintenance plans from Russia for the year 2024 for the nuclear power station. Specifically, IAEA experts have been unable to enter the reactor halls of Units 1, 2, and 6 of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in the past 2 weeks. This marks the first instance where IAEA experts have been barred from accessing the reactor hall of a unit that was in a state of cold shutdown in the plant. The denial of access to these crucial areas of the nuclear power plant raises significant concerns under Russian occupation regarding the operational security and safety of the facility, which is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. This, by the way, is old footage of the power station. I couldn't find a new recent report about this current situation going on. On January 6th, Russia announced an ambitious plan to significantly ramp up its production of drones by the year 2030. The country aims to produce more than 32,000 drones annually by 2030, with domestic producers accounting for 70% of the drone market in the stated goal. Deputy First Minister Belousov revealed that annual production volume of UAVs, excluding those for educational purposes, is planned at 32,000 units, and it represents a almost threefold increase from their current production volume. The Russian government's national drone project with 700 billion rubles, which is approximately 7.6 billion US dollars. And more details are expected to be published about the procurement plan later in the month. Next item for January 6th. The European Union has recently imposed new sanctions targeting Russia's state-run diamond giant, Alrosa, along with its CEO. The EU's sanctions have been specifically levied against Alrosa, the world's largest diamond producer. It accounts for over 90% of Russia's diamond production and is a significant source of revenue for the Russian government. The inclusion of Alrosa and its CEO in the EU sanctions list is a direct response to their role in supporting the Russian government, particularly in relation to the annexation of Crimea and the destabilization of Ukraine. A central aspect of these sanctions is the complete prohibition on the trade of diamonds originating from Russia. This includes not only natural and synthetic diamonds, but also diamond jewelry. In an effort to further tighten these restrictions, the EU plans to, in the future, implement a phase-in beginning in March 2024, which will extend the ban to indirect import of Russian diamonds processed in third-party countries. These sanctions form part of the EU's 12th sanction package since February 2022 against Russia. Apart from the diamond trade ban, the package also includes a No Russia clause. This clause prohibits the re-exportation of sensitive goods and technology to Russia, particularly those used in the Russian military. The sanctions expand on import-export controls to hinder the technological advancement of Russia's defense and security sector, encompassing items like chemicals, lithium batteries, and machine parts. Additionally, the package aims to reinforce enforcement and anti-circumvention measures and introduces a strengthened information sharing mechanism to I would just maybe add that the sanctions are quite sweeping at this point, and this diamond sanction has been discussed for a while. The third-party sanctions, though, are very significant because the circumvention of sanctions is becoming a real issue. There's countries that have multiplied their imports of these key sectors of technology by huge margins. So in enforcing these third-party sanctions are really key to the success of implementing them. And then my final news item for the current week is an update on the current situation with the Polish border. On January 4th, so I should mention, this is kind of several events have occurred throughout the week, so I'm just going to kind of read all this in order. So on January 4th, 2024, Polish farmers restarted their blockade at a Poland-Ukraine border crossing. This action was taken as a form of protest, with the farmers accusing the new Polish government of failing to meet their demands for financial assistance. They joined the truckers at the Medyka-Shahini crossing, where haulers had already been blocking other crossings. A significant development occurred on January 6, 2024, when Polish farmers agreed to suspend the blockade at that crossing. This decision came after reaching an agreement with government representatives. The Polish Agriculture Ministry announced the suspension and marked a temporary resolution of the issue. As of today, January 7th, an agreement has apparently been reached between Polish farmers and the Warsaw government that met the farmers' demands. This agreement led to the end of the blockade of the Poland-Ukraine border crossing, and the dispute was seen as an early test for the new government of Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. I should mention it's unclear to me whether the truckers are still involved in blockades, but having the farmers agree to end the blockades is very significant. So that is the news for the week. I'm told I have a question regarding some stuff about ATACMS. We'll have Colby answer that later. So I think that concludes my segment. So thanks everyone for paying attention for my little ramble about the news this week. And I will turn it back over to Jonathan. Jonathan, over to you.
Thank you, Joseph. Colby, you're very welcome to answer this question from the audience now, if you can hear us. Or just give
Test.
Loud and clear.
Okay, there we go. So ATACMS. I wrote an entire thread about this that answers all of these questions. It's pinned on my Twitter feed at Colby Badwar, so I would encourage people to read that if they have not done so already. But in brief, there are approximately 1,200 ATACMS in the inventory of the U.S. Army, which are officially, quote-unquote, expired because they are well beyond their official shelf life. But most likely they are actually in usable condition, given that the small number of ATACMS that were already provided to Ukraine were some of the oldest missiles that existed in the U.S. inventory, are 26 years old. So presumably the rest of the inventory, which is younger than that, would also be in usable condition, and it's not difficult to verify the condition of those missiles. They can like do an X-ray basically on the rocket motors to ensure that the propellant is still good, and that very well may have already been done already. If you want to read into some of the comments that have been made by Assistant Secretary of the Army Doug Bush, saying basically that they're ready to deliver ATACMS whenever the decision was made. That was, he said that I think back in September or October. So they may have already checked all of these missiles or some portion of the missiles and determined that they are usable. So yes, there are missiles. Yes, they are technically expired, but they are usable and could be sent to Ukraine as soon as a political decision has been made.
And Colby, this does remind me, there was like some recent news this week. I think there was like some comments maybe taken out of context where I vaguely remember reading the statement. It was like thousands of missiles and rockets are, kind of sitting on U.S. shelves, are going to be decommissioned, et cetera. But I think that people took that to mean there are thousands of ATACMS, and that's like not true, right? It's like a few hundred ATACMS. Is that accurate?
It's 1,200 ATACMS that are in the expired inventory. This is coming from an article that was written in Newsweek that was primarily citing Dan Rice, who's a former U.S. Army officer and has been an advisor of sorts to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. And what he actually was saying is that there's thousands of other rockets, to include ATACMS, just general different munitions that can be utilized by HIMARS or by M270 MLRS. And what he would be primarily referring to there are M26 rockets, which are the original munitions that were designed for the M270, which have DPCIM submunitions in them. Not the exact same ones that are in the artillery shells that Ukraine's currently getting, but they have actually a more powerful DPICM in them. And there's certainly a large quantity of those that are in stock as well. We don't know exactly how many, but it is a large quantity. Some number of those are being allocated to the ground-launched small diameter program, because that ground-launched small diameter bomb is taking the rocket from those M26s and then removing the warhead and then attaching a small diameter bomb to it. So some are being utilized for that, but beyond that, there's definitely a lot more that are theoretically available. So that's what he's referring to there. But the bigger thing with this Newsweek article is that the assertion was made that all of these are going to be destroyed, which is not true. There's no evidence that any of these expired munitions are imminently going to be destroyed. Certainly, at some point in the future, any expired munition has to be demilitarized at some point in time. But there is no evidence that that is at all something that's going to happen soon. And the Pentagon explicitly stated that it is not true, that they are going to be destroying these munitions. And I have no reason whatsoever to doubt that based on all available evidence. There's no actual proof that they're planning on destroying certainly any of the ATACMS. What's going on with the M26s is a little less certain. They were being demilitarized, but that was halted. That was halted by the Trump administration, and the Biden administration has not resumed destruction of the remaining American inventory of cluster munitions. So there's no evidence that that is something that's happening right now.
Thank you, Colby. Thank you, Joseph. It gives me great pleasure to welcome a very special guest to Tochnyi today, Jonathan M.S. Pearce, who runs the popular YouTube broadcast ATP Politics. Mr. Pearce is also a columnist for Only Sky and a notable public speaker. So I'm going to hand over to Erland, Daniele, and anybody else for a roundtable discussion. Welcome, Mr. Pearce.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you, Jonathan, and thank you for joining us. So the reason for why me and Daniele wanted to invite you to our stream is because you caught up on Daniele's Twitter thread on the FPV drones, and you made some comments about that. And then you also had a follow-up video where you went through some of the criticism or questions about the thread. So I thought that was very interesting. And yeah, Daniele is a member here at Tochnyi, and you know, he was developing this thread using some of the resources we have available at Tochnyi, which is also Andrew, which is an associate at Tochnyi. So yeah, I want to start by asking you, what is your channel ATP Geopolitics about, and how did it come to be?
Well, I do have another. In fact, technically, it should be my main YouTube channel, which is a philosophical channel called Atypical Philosopher. So that's where the ATP comes from. I used to meet once a month with friends. We go down a pub and we discuss philosophy. I'm a philosopher of religion at heart, so I've written a dozen books on whether or not God exists and all this kind of stuff that is not really germane to this conversation at all. But it gives, so that philosophical background is really interesting in approaching geopolitics, and I think it is also important to have a good grasp of psychology as well, to understand why people do what they do. Because sadly enough, it's not good enough to argue with people and expect that rational evidence is going to change their minds. Is usually, you know, you can't argue someone out of a position they never argued themselves into. So you need to understand psychology and philosophy, and you know, how to argue and how to understand sort of truth and knowledge as well. I think it's just really helpful for understanding geopolitics and what happened at the beginning of the war. You know, I was already writing on politics anyway with my column at Only Sky. So yes, it's philosophy. Yes, it's about secularism and whatnot, but it's also about you know, politics and the interaction and these big ideas on the world stage and big events on the world stage. And when the war started, I was immediately transfixed by it and obsessed by it, and I think partly, and I've done videos on like why I'm so interested in it. You know, we always need to question ourselves and our motivations and what's going on in our own heads, and why I think it really talks to me is because of the whole moral dimension. It's so, to me, it's just so unbelievably unfair, and it's one of the very few world events where I can clearly say these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. Everything else in life is so nuanced and so grey, but this is one of the most morally clear things to me that I think I've experienced. And I was just absolutely enraged by the unfairness of it, and also how damned important it is to us all. So I started doing videos on my philosophical blog about the war, and it turned out there's a massive audience for that. And I was like, oh dear, right, I've now got 2 areas of content, so I split them up and made my ATP geopolitics. Sorry, that's a lot of talking to answer your question.
Yeah, so my next question was like, and why Ukraine? But you answered that. So I watched your channel for a bit, and one of the reasons for that was because of Andrew Perpetua. He introduced me to your channel, and then I don't know if it was coincidence, you picked up on Germinate to Ukraine, which is also here, of course, and you had him on twice, and I've been starting to listen to your videos at work, because you go through a lot of the news in a quite methodical way, and you filter out stuff. So it's nice to listen to that commentary. I really appreciate it. So please, if you don't know ATP geopolitics, then go have a listen, because it's really good. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. And actually, something that I think is really important, I think this chimes in totally with what I understand you guys doing. So something that obsesses me is disinformation and misinformation. And in philosophy, there's this term called epistemology. Epistemology is a study of knowledge and truth, right? And we hear these days, of course, we hear about national security being an issue, about cybersecurity being an issue in terms of, the world of the internet and web, and et cetera. And now we're starting to hear this term called epistemic security. And epistemic security is security concerning truth and knowledge. And we've got to this situation where, fake news and all this stuff that's been going on, where people can choose their narratives, and people can be manipulated by narratives that are being amplified or created by bad faith actors, and this is incredibly dangerous for us all around the world. It doesn't matter where you are. Look, if Russia had been sensible about their aims, they would never have invaded Ukraine. They would have taken all the money that they've spent on that war, and they would have employed a whole load of trolls in troll farms, and that money would have delivered them such an amazing return on investment. Like this war will go down in history as one of the biggest wastes of money for them, and setting them back years. But they could have achieved far more by just dividing societies around the world with their disinformation. And so part of what really drives me is accuracy, is being as objective as possible, whilst having a clear moral evaluation that I do. So I'm clearly pro-Ukrainian, but I don't want to fool myself, and I don't want to fool my audience. So it's really important to be accurate and to call out disinformation when I see it.
Yeah, and we totally agree with that. We try to the best of our ability to only give out information that we either have confirmed somehow through imagery, satellite imagery, or just by direct sources, etc. Good sourcing is, of course, key, and we learned how to filter out, of course, a lot of the bad sources. And I guess you also did as well, because it's really difficult when you navigate this media space right now, and the information space. And I just wanted to ask, like, how did the mis and disinformation enter your country and its media from your perspective, and the information that you were already consuming through different social medias, etc. How did you experience that when before the war and when the war started and the full-scale invasion?
Before I answer that question, and perhaps relevant to that question, we need to be aware of our biases all the time. So none of us are immune from cognitive biases, and one of the most prevalent ones is confirmation bias, where we ascribe more value to evidence or information that confirms preconceived ideas or the conclusions we already have or whatever. And so we're very susceptible to saying, oh, I really like that. That confirms what I say. Therefore, I find that more believable. And I don't like that because it doesn't confirm it. It goes against my conclusion. So I'm going to somehow devalue that information or that information source, or I'll poison the well, or I'll shoot the messenger, or whatever. We use all these tactics to skew our evaluations, and you know, it's very difficult to be as objective as possible. And I will pick up on things that I'll go, oh, that's brilliant. I've got to talk about that. I've got to include that in my news pieces because I'm really excited, because that's really good news and it sounds really good for Ukraine. But I've always in the back of my mind, as I'm sure you guys are aware, have to be thinking, how can this not be true? Or, you know, am I only believing this because I want it to be true? Is this the wishful thinking fallacy? And so that is something that I think all of us need to be super aware of the whole time. And you guys, you know, I'm teaching my grandmother to suck eggs here. You guys know that as much as anyone.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, also, like, I guess we all experienced that we retweeted something or told something that, oh shoot, that was probably not true. And what do you do then, like, in your position?
Well, a great example of this recently was Gerasimov died, right? And you get this thing that comes out and you think, oh my goodness, that's amazing. But the first thing you should do is like, okay, what's the original source of this? And where does that come from? And who is saying it? Now, the problem is I'm so super busy that I can't always dig down. And so if I can't do that, then I have to curate a bunch of sources that I have good faith in, right? So that I think, well, I know from previous experience, I mean, this is called inductive reasoning in philosophy, where you say, right, you know, this horse has won 20 races, so it's a good bet for the next race. So these guys have been reliable so far, so often. So actually, you know, if they're saying this is true, then that's pretty cool. But with the Gerasimov thing, you know, I was really happy that when I talked about that, I think it was yesterday, was it, or the day before, I said, this is a rumor, take it with a massive block of salt, right? Not just a pinch of salt, a block of salt. And I said, I've heard these kind of claims before. I think this is not true. I would give this a very low probability. And it's so, talking about epistemology, sometimes it's useful to have something called epistemic humility. So that's where we're humble about what we know. And sometimes it's just really useful and also quite safe and conservative to say, I'm not really sure this is true. I've heard this as a rumor. Please treat this as a rumor, rather than saying, Gerasimov has died. You know, there are other YouTubers out there that jumped on that and then have had to make retractions since then. And that's, you know, because of confirmation biases. We want this to be true. So I think, you know, we just need to always be checking ourselves. We need to curate good sources. And when those sources are found to be wanting, we need to not be afraid to like drop them off our list. Actually, you know, it's a betting game, right? You failed me a few too many times. I'm not going to trust you. And then eventually we just have decent, reputable, accurate sources that we can have faith in, and we live in a more accurate kind of information space. But also it's very useful to say when you are wrong and say, actually, and this is why I find it really useful to read the comments on my thread. I'd spent way too long reading YouTube comments, right? But actually I want to know that, and this is what I used to do when I started blogging, which is I'm blogging to put my ideas out here. And if they are wrong, I need you to tell me so I can self-correct. If you approach life in that manner, which is a kind of pretty abstract philosophical way of doing things, but it's really important, then you are saying, like, it is very possible I am wrong. And if you're a good faith actor in my threads rather than a troll, if you're challenging what I'm saying and I feel you're a good faith actor and you have got good rational evidence against my position, then I need to take that into account, because the easiest person to fool is yourself, as a physicist Richard Feynman says. So you've got to be so careful about that, and just don't be afraid to change your opinion. I mean, we're so bad at changing our minds, but sometimes we've got to say, look, I was wrong there.
Yeah, so I'm gonna ask you again, like, how did it enter? How did the misinformation and disinformation enter your country from your perspective, and also the media that you consumed? Like, how did you experience that?
Well, I mean, we all experience it all the time when we're reading our media, but you know, I mean, people slag off mainstream media quite a lot, but actually, do you know what they have? They have to adhere to certain regulations, or certainly in our country, in my country. And when they publish things, they can't just publish anything. And actually, sometimes we need to recognize that. But when you're talking about social media, where they don't have that kind of regulation, people can say what they like, and Twitter and YouTube are just rife for that. And so, in our information spaces, we are all coming across disinformation on a daily basis. And I'll speak to people in my life. I was speaking to one of my really close mates who is one of the original, he's the starter of Atypical Philosophers, right? And we were down a pub the other night, and we were, as ever, like, we're talking about, Ukraine, because if I'm in the conversation, we're talking about Ukraine at some point. And he was like, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? And I was like, hang on, mate. I mean, you're really pro-Ukrainian, but those are real, like, Kremlin talking points that you're saying. Now, where have you got that? And he's like, oh, I was listening to Peter Hitchens. I was like, okay, right. And then he's thinking, well, then there are these players in our different media spaces who are in certain camps and who will be very much victim to spouting Russian talking points, or maybe they might have elements of being anti-American or anti-Western, or this political persuasion, that political persuasion. They're more aligned to, or they're more vulnerable to those narratives that are coming across the waves and spreading into our information spaces. So we are all social media animals, and we feed voraciously on information on social media. And so how does it come into my country? The same way it comes into all of our countries, through social media predominantly, and also through mainstream media. But we hope that some of the checks and balances will filter out some of that disinformation in mainstream media. But again, there are still issues in mainstream media that really need to be addressed, such as like the false balance idea that you have two opposing ideas and you feel you have to give 50% of airtime to each, even though one is a like nonsense idea and the other one's really established. Sorry, that's me, meandering around answering that question, but it's just social media, and we speak to people all the time who are victim to that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to try and transition that into the fact that the FPV subject. So basically, we've all of us are extreme observers of the Ukraine war compared to the normal citizen, right? But
yep.
There are a lot of us, and the drone warfare has maybe been one of the things that have impacted us most because of all the video images, and it really brings the war so close to us. And then we had this transition from the drones either observing combat action or actually dropping munitions straight onto the enemy. And then we had this new element that started last year, about 6 to 7 months ago, when the FPV drones entered the combat. And since then, it's kind of been this mystery. No one really knew how to analyze this, in my opinion, because we had no idea about what the capability really was. But it has proven to be very, very powerful, and both Ukraine and Russia has done quite a lot of effort to enhance this capability and the production of the systems themselves. And recently, there's been some claims. Just I think in November, the Russians claimed they were going to produce 6 times more FPV drones than Ukraine had just mentioned they would produce per month, and that's kind of what Daniele's starting point was, wasn't it, Daniele? Daniele, are you with us? I'm gonna try and.
I got so fed up with my long, winding answers.
I'm gonna unmute Daniele. Maybe he was forced mute by me.
Hello.
Yes, there you are. So, okay. Wasn't this your starting point, Daniele?
It was exactly that, but essentially, I've been since the start of this war, but even a year before this war. But I was always quite affected by the fact that I saw a lot of propaganda on different areas around Russia that was coming out every time in the West, and affecting a lot also the ability of believing in ourselves, in our capability, and also in our moral ability to defend democracy. And so this was one of the many things that I started to look at, because I questioned to myself, if they are able to essentially deploy to produce, not deploy, so many FPV drones, then why they are procuring from China, because there were already news about these drones coming also from China. So let's say why we don't see this massive amount of drone strikes, despite there are a lot, and Andrew can confirm that every day is very tough for him and Geek follow all the strikes, which are very well published and very much published on telegrams, which I try to avoid in the last 6 months because it's terrible to geolocate those happening, because the images are, of course, very strong sometimes. So I start to dig in, and I generally started by looking at the report from Twitter of Andrew, and just looking at the numbers, doing some plots, and try to understand if there was some trends. And then I went back to Andrew, who told me, but you should look at the infantry, because at the infantry you will see probably kind of Russian being the same or even higher. And he didn't any analysis. He just, by looking and mapping each case, he was by bull eye able to say what we saw then in the numbers. Of course, we had I had then the possibility to open the database and discover, I think, a small treasure. And Andrew, please, again, thank you for your work, because I think what you are doing is very valuable. We can improve it. I will try to help you as much as I can, but I think it's a big resource of information. And what I want to say is that this information, I know a lot of people, and I accept any comments. I come from an academia background, so any comment, even harsh on my work, I'm very appreciated anyway, unless it's trolling or disrespecting Andrew, as some have done below my thread. But I accept any critic, and I take these as a point where I can start and improve the work because I think that what I've done is probably not probably, is for sure just the start. And if in 2 weeks someone will come with a better study, which initiated by my work, I've done my job.
So it's really interesting, because it's very much like the scientific method, and you know, data is absolutely key here. And if we want to make evidence-based policy decisions, or we want to have behavior that is based on something, then it needs to be based on evidence, really. You know, intuitions aren't good enough. And so what Andrew Perpetua's done is got that raw data. And my goodness, can I just say, Andrew Perpetua must be the hardest working individual in OSINT at the moment. He must have a time machine, because goodness me, he achieves a phenomenal amount. But that data is absolutely diamond, and it just needs someone to be able to analyze that more formally, and that's exactly what you've done. And then, as you say, look, what you want is someone to go away and critique that in the same way that peer review in scientific journals, and then another scientific piece of research will go out and build on that, or critique that, or whatever. And then eventually we are moving towards a more and more accurate understanding of reality. Sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. And honestly, one thing that I didn't expect was the explosion of the thread, which overwhelmed me in the first few hours, because essentially my mobile, which is not often so pinged, was just in continual notification. So I was a bit scared at the beginning. But the main point is that I wanted, honestly, to put this out, mainly to try also to first of all initiate a debate on the topic. And one thing that I'm a bit regretful is that I didn't put. I tried all my best to don't, because many people just read the first part and they say, oh, a lot of vehicle loss is very good, we are winning over. No, please look at the infantry, look at the missing data, because we see that there is a huge gap, 3 times on the drone usage against the vehicles. There are a lot of speculation we can make, but there is probably other work that need to be done. And I don't want to wish cast, and I don't want to say that everything is sorted on FPV side. So my aim was to raise awareness rather than, but of course also saying, well, maybe we have to be careful. We have to continue to support this activity, but we have also to recognize the weakness of the enemy, and the weakness is the propaganda, because the more propaganda they use, this means that the more problem they have. And even the fact that they are so openly accepting help from China from these type of munitions, I think is a very big signal that they are not able to do what they said. Yes.
There's something else to add to that, and I was talking about this yesterday in my news, one of my news videos, which is when Russia announced that they are making, or they are going to facilitate civilians constructing drones to the tune of 32,000 annually by 2030. There's a couple of really interesting conclusions or speculations you can take from that, which is, one, they're expecting the war to be going to 2030. I mean, if you're putting a production thing in place that isn't like, this is not, we're going to produce like barrels for artillery, which you're going to have to buy capital and do, you know, that's a big old thing where you might put a 5-6 year plan in place. When you're just talking about random people building drones at home and given to the army, then that's weird that you'll be taking that to 2030. By 2030, we're going to have 32,000 a year. But as you say, with this idea of going to China, if they're saying we are going to do this, then it means that they need them. And if they need, and that's not a huge amount of drones either, if they need that many drones and they go into the effort of trying to get them from their civilian population, it means they don't have the required amount of drones as it is, and they don't have plans for that going forward outside of, you know, they need 32,000 a year from civilians. So yeah, some of this data really, the question is, as you say, you've got the Ukrainians saying that they are creating 50,000 drones a month, and the Russians at the same time saying they're building 300,000 a month, right? Are both of those correct? And what evidence can we bring to justify our belief that they are either correct or false? And that's what you have attempted to do.
I tried to show a thread here by Samuel Bendit that went into this this topic actually about how the Russians are producing the FPV drones, and yeah, he basically talks quickly about what you can observe from Russian Telegram channels about how they produce them, and this doesn't look like a very professional setup from my point of view compared to what I've seen.
So sorry, Erlen, if I can add something. I just spoke with a couple of volunteers who operate FPV drones, and they told me that sometimes also they have to do some soldering, because for transportation or for save some money and buy more, they buy FPV kit. So it's like really like a RC airplane. They buy the kit, it arrives packed with everything that you need, and of course you need someone with some skill in soldering, not PCB soldering, of course, as you see in some of other video from Daniel that you probably have the tweet, and so even Ukrainian have to do this, honestly. But if you analyze that images, you will see something. Yeah, this was from Daniel, and if you go at the end, there is like yeah, that one. If you go up, no, this is a new iteration that the Russians say that is too complex. It's just a relay, just to tell you how much electronic they understand. That one. You see those yellowing; those are soldering done by someone that doesn't flux his motherboard, his PCB very well, so he's ruining a bit the contacts, and this can create issues, of course. I mean, for a suicide drone, probably it's fine, but this tells you that there is a lot of integration by people that never have soldered anything, or have very, very small, or very, but it's very new to the area. Yeah, go on.
I have taught soldering to 8-year-olds before, and even my 8-year-olds did better soldering than that.
Good.
Ouch.
Yeah, I wanted to try to not be too harsh, honestly.
I'm not showing this thread to make it like so that the Russians are the only ones doing this on the front line, because I know that the Ukrainians are as well. But
oh no, there's a group that I follow that they just recently started their own FPV group. Before then, they strictly did artillery. They have M777s, and they're now getting into drones. but they just started their drone program, and they've been posting the process of starting this program. And a lot of the things that you see in these pictures are the sorts of things they were posting as they were getting their drones together. And they worked side by side with Madhyar and with a few of the other bigger drone groups. I think they worked with Achilles as well to get off the ground. I think Madhyar was training their pilots so that they would know what to do, and they have like a baseline skill set basically. And but yeah, I mean, you have to manufacture your own munitions too. It's not just the drones. You have to make your own munitions, and like random soldiers don't know how to make munitions. I'll tell you what. Like the way, like some of the videos they're posting were frankly terrifying. Like they take like an RPG and they have to cut off the outside of the RPG with a saw. And that's terrifying.
Can someone answer me this? Because I've seen that one, and you might have this lined up, Erland. But there's that one that has the two the loops of wire, that the idea that if they touch, then it completes a circuit and it blows up the drone. And the idea is that you drive that into something, and that will push the wires together and explode it. Is it really bloody dangerous? Yeah, that's the one. Is it really bloody dangerous for drone operators to actually A, make these things, and then B, like set them off? Because surely if you just trip over, like I've got multiple sclerosis, so I would be useless on the front line. I'd be like tripping. Oh, there goes all of us as I've blown us up with a drone. It must be so dangerous, surely.
Yeah, Andrew, weren't there a bunch of videos of people killing themselves in the beginning of this?
Yeah, people die and lose their hands all the time. There are safeties involved. There's one really interesting video on YouTube. I don't have the link, don't ask me, but it's there somewhere, where these guys were launching a drone, and they were showing the safeties that they had. And basically what they did is you walk over with your drone. They take off very, very far away from where they are. So you go out, you put the drone on a holder. You put the battery into like a battery pack, but there's like a lanyard that connects to the holder. So when the drone takes off, when it gets to a certain height, the lanyard will pull, and it will connect the battery to the explosive.
Right. Yeah, that's because I was thinking there must be something like that. Can I just chip in with so I have 10 questions that I think are really pertinent to this discussion in terms of who is in the best position now for drones, and where they go with drones, and where we're at. Would it be okay to just quickly rattle them off?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Yeah, so how I see it is these are pertinent questions. Which nation is producing more drones? Is there a difference between the approaches and outcomes of each nation with regard to civilian-built drones? 3, which nation is producing a greater variety of drones, and does one nation's drones have greater technological capabilities than the other? 4, which nation is training drone operators better and in greater numbers? 5, what is the difference between the tactical usage of the drone operators and units between the nations? 6, how does the access to quality and time-sensitive intelligence, satellite imagery and whatnot, affect drone usage? 7, what is the difference between the hit rate of each nation? 8, which nation hits more targets, and which type of targets, such as infantry, mechanized equipment, trenches, dugouts, buildings? 9, what does a difference in drone targeting say about the position and tactics of each nation? And 10, going forward, which nation is therefore in a better position to have a more effective use of drones? And I think that's a whole load of questions, but kind of that's the totality of what we're seeking to answer when we're looking at data. And we can't answer those questions without the data. And so Andrew's work is absolutely vital to be even starting this ball rolling.
Oh my God. Okay, so let's start with Daniele.
I can answer a lot of those questions.
Okay.
Legend.
Okay. First Andrew, and then Daniele. What did you get from the analysis?
Go on, Andrew.
Well, if you go through the questions, I can give you just yes or no on each one.
Okay, let's try that. Who's producing more drones?
I think it's Russia, but it's really hard to tell. It's almost certainly Russia, though.
Is there a difference between approaches and outcomes of each nation with regard to civilian-built drones? So, in other words, who's doing a better job of doing civilian-built drones?
I think Ukraine is doing better civilian built drones. They're more high tech and more varied. But I'll answer the next part because you're going to get to it.
Yeah. So, which nation is producing greater variety of drones, and is one nation's drones, do they have greater technological capabilities than, than the other?
The Russian drones are vastly more capable. Like, it's not even comparable. It's almost embarrassing how far Ukraine has fallen behind. And I think, I don't actually know this, but I think the reason is because the Russian military is pouring money into it. Because there are certain Russian drone groups that are just vastly more capable than everybody else. And by everybody else, I mean literally everybody else. So there's kind of like most of the Russian units and the Ukrainian units are more or less equal, but then there are these Russian units that are way better, like years and years ahead. That, you know,
And they have
I think
that,
it's military funding.
They have those components then, and literally the technological know-how that is just that others don't.
Well, they have really high-end thermal cameras. They have better digital connections. I'm pretty sure they're EW resistant. They're just ridiculously good drones, and they've got to be really expensive. Like a normal drone is like $400, and those drones I bet are like $2,000.
So then
They're
the
really
next
good.
question would be, do they have more of that type of drone? Like, do they have? Is there a critical mass of those types of drones that is making a significant difference on the battlefield?
They don't post very much of those drones. When they do post it, it's like a compilation of like 10 or 20. But they only post like one of those a week. So I don't know how often they use it, but it's really unsettling the way they use them, because cause Ukraine has to move at night, right? So does Russia. You have to move everything at night. And what they're doing with these drones is they have ridiculously good thermal cameras. They can see really far out with high definition, and they can see like what type of vehicle you are from like pretty far away, like maybe a kilometer away. They can see what vehicle you are. So they can like they can fly at you and say like, that's a pickup, not worth it. That's a pickup, not worth it. This is a tank, we're gonna blow it up, or whatever, you know. And Ukraine can't do that. Ukraine has thermal drones, but their thermals are trash. Like, you can see a vehicle, but you have no clue what the vehicle is, and you have almost no depth perception, so you can't really even tell how far away it is. So like the Ukrainian thermal drones they do work, and they do get hits, but it's not comparable. And taking out that ability to move at night is really scary. And I've heard from a lot of Ukrainian soldiers who are like, this is more upsetting to them than anything else, is losing the ability to move at night.
And well, I guess that leads on to what is the difference between the tactical usage of drone operators and units between the nations? And you kind of answered that in your video thread. And when I spoke to you with regard to, this is Daniele will probably have a lot to say about this, which is the data that he's analyzed is very much about infantry and vehicles. But you've said that actually a vast amount of Russian footage concerns dugouts and trenches.
Yeah, they're
Yeah, I'm showing a video that portrays this very subject right now, which is a Russian video of they're just going for trenches and houses and bunkers, really.
But does this suggest that actually there's a lack of artillery ammunition? Because I was thinking this could be one of the things that you could conclude from that. Like, are they doing the job of artillery?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they are doing the job of artillery.
So the question is why? Is it better, or is it they don't have the shells or barrels?
I don't think they have a lack of ammo. I think it is better to use drones for this sort of thing, because you can directly hit the thing you want to. Like with these bunkers, it's more difficult because they're pretty well fortified. It's a giant pile of sticks. Like, let's just be honest. Like, it's hard to get rid of a giant pile of sticks. But with houses, they can fly into a house, literally hover inside of it and look around for the weak point in the house and hit it and knock down a house in one drone. Like, I've seen that happen dozens and dozens of times. So these drones can be very, very effective at doing this sort of thing. You can fly into a door and knock out the door, and then fly into the bunker and blow up the bunker. That happens all the time. So
does one side have better access? Because I've always assumed, or I've been led to believe, that the Ukrainians have much better access to time-sensitive intelligence, such as satellite imagery. But does that make any difference with the usage of drones? Is it just the drones themselves are what give you the intelligence to then go and use maybe other drones or that drone to do whatever strikes?
Ukraine has bad intelligence. Well, I don't know if intelligence is the right word. I don't know what word to call it, but they're bad at it. They're not good at communicating across units, like like one drone unit to their adjacent drone unit. They're really bad at communicating. So, for example, Ukraine kind of shares drone feeds. So if one drone sees a vehicle coming, everybody can see that vehicle because they share the information. And then all the drone units fly a drone out to the vehicle. So, like, if there's one vehicle, they hit it with like 5 drones, and then the vehicle explodes. And then there's another vehicle. They're like, we used all our drones on the first one. So, like, that sort of thing happens. Like, it's really not good. It's very bad, actually.
The flip side, though, is that many people claim that the Russians themselves have claimed, particularly in the Crimean area, we've seen intercepts where they say, we're not talking to each other. In fact, the only reason we're communicating with the next unit is because we've got a guy from Wagner and they've got a guy from Wagner who happen to know each other. And that's how we're talking. But otherwise, there's a lack of communication. So I guess that although it can be really bad for the Ukrainians, and I'm not trying to be positive for the Ukrainians, but that doesn't mean to say it's not also bad in terms of communication for the Russians.
Oh yeah, that would be like adjacent unit communication, which is like a different issue. Which I mean, I don't know how good Russia is at that. They're probably pretty bad at it. But yeah, there's you can have the communication between your adjacent units, and then there's the communication between the adjacent drone units, because the adjacent drone unit might not even be your adjacent unit. Because the drone unit may be like a completely different thing. Like, it may not even be the same brigade. Like, communicating with the adjacent unit is probably easier than the drone units talking to each other.
And I guess to wrap up all the last questions into one, I mean, so when I was talking about Daniele's thread, and I said, I think this evidences that Ukraine, that Russia are not producing 300,000 drones a month. And I think we can derive that from the idea that the Ukrainians are actually pretty much on parity with infantry strikes, and they're having many more vehicle strikes and equipment strikes. And then you popped up and said, actually, there are loads of Russian strikes on dugouts, etc. But I still don't know that would go as far as to justify 300,000 a month, and I just don't think we are seeing 300,000 a month translated onto the battlefield. Is that where you would stand with that?
I have no clue how many they're making. It's like everyone I talk to says that Russia has more than Ukraine, and how much more, I have no idea.
Okay, so I wanted to ask Daniele, from your thread and the work you did with it, what sort of conclusions did you make based upon the data, and what kind of data did you actually have to work with? I guess it's a good question to ask.
Regarding the data, essentially, Andrew created along these nearly 2 years an Excel spreadsheet that contains different columns, and each column has a certain type of information, like geographical coordinate, type of attack, type of the link to the Telegram channel, which most of the time is there, and also description, what type of attack, if was done on infantry or not. So it's quite very well detailed, and also quite well organized in a way that you can use a computer program to analyze the data and try to extract all the information that you need, essentially. And what is very important to underline is, of course, that this is a work ongoing, so there are changes done in the database as Andrew add the new data. And so these mean that when you analyze the database, you have to keep in mind that some stuff can be changed, so you need to adapt. But more or less is very consistent. And regarding some of the questions that Jonathan, and this is the beauty of discussing things openly and in a very constructive way. For example, I partially disagree with Andrew on the technological leap, because it's true that some of the drone that we see have night vision, but we don't see them in the same amount of other type of drones that they used. And regarding the quantities, of course, we need to be careful, because the data that I analyzed and anyone can analyze is based on what we see. If the Russian, for example, I mean, in my personal opinion, after I have talked further with Andrew and listened to his point about the building, I think that possibly, if you remember, there was like a gap in the vehicles. Probably that gap is not that big. I mean, there is a gap on vehicles, but it's probably operational, as Jonathan suggested, and some other commentators said. Of course, Russia use more vehicles, so is more likely to be hit by FPV drones. And potentially, so the missing drone in that plot that you're showing now are moved on another area, which I didn't cover because we don't have clear data on that at the moment, which is building. In my opinion, from what I saw in the data, I'm starting also, you saw Andrew last night, I was working on using the coordinate of each attack and place on a map, try to see which are the hotter area, which are the less affected area by FPV. So by looking at the data and what is coming out, I think at the moment when I analyze the data until December, there was a kind of parity from the data. This means that possibly Russian are a bit ahead of that, and we will continue to push to have more. So I agree with Andrew, of course, on the fact that is for Ukraine is paramount to improve the amount of FPV drone that they can deploy, because of course they may have better quality drones, because the drone produced by Russians, from what I saw, are very, very simple, in some extent very similar to what we saw at the beginning, and in the best case scenarios are equal to the Ukrainian one. They don't use sophisticated technologies. Even the fuse, let's call the fuse that we saw, more or less both the sides use the same approach. Daniele was reporting a use of a relay, which is a very simple component, but the Russian didn't like it because they cannot integrate very well, from the report that he posted on that thread. So I don't see like a technological leap. What is concerning, for example, of drones coming from China, which are made in aluminium, I'm not concerned about the quantity, but the usage of such drones, because many people say, oh, but aluminium is heavy. Yes, it's heavy, but why doing aluminium? Because you want maybe in the future mount more powerful engines, and then using more powerful engines to lift higher payload, which may be very much used for what Andrew was suggesting, so for striking bunkers.
Can I? Are you pausing there, Daniele?
Yeah. I'm giving you way.
Yeah, but just really interesting. Erland, can you show Daniela's graphs again? and particularly the vehicle graph. The drone hits on vehicles. Yeah, so that one. So assuming that the infantry hits are equal, I know they're not equal, but they're not too far apart from each other. So let's just assume the infantry are equal, and let's assume that Ukraine are producing 50,000 a month, and the 50,000 a month translates into December figures, right? So let's just assume. I know there's some assumptions, and then when Andrew says, well, actually the Russians are hitting a lot of bunkers and whatnot, and then as Daniele says, well, this could be because there just aren't the vehicles nearby for them to hit, and I think that there is a lot of we can put a lot of store in that. The question is, does the 241 difference between the Ukrainian strikes and the Russian strikes there, would they translate across onto buildings and trenches and dugouts? Or like just statistically speaking, or are there vastly more? Because if what Andrew is saying that there are loads more hits on dugouts, but those loads more hits equate to say 240, then actually what Daniele is saying there is that in reality we have a parity in at least the successful hits of the drones. That's not to talk about whether there's any percentage difference in failures. So then, as Daniele then implies, we have possibly good justification that actually Russia aren't producing 300,000, but there is pretty much about the same amount of production. The question is how many more buildings are being hit than the difference in the December figures of vehicles hit between Russia and Ukraine. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, totally. And effectively, by speaking with Andrew, listening to your when you essentially reviewed my threads and having some feedback from other people expert in this area, I had the feeling that if there is a so big gap, there are several possibilities. But one is, of course, there is a gap. The other one, that this gap is just due to the fact that resource is used, because I'm sure 100% and I think we are all on the same page here, that there are no drones left somewhere in a warehouse because Putin don't want to use too much power in Ukraine. This is a lie. This is completely wrong, because this type of ammunition, as Andrew and Erland show in those terrific videos, are very simple and very effective. So if you want to obliterate, completely destroy a trench line, you take 5,000, 2,000 of these drones, if you have enough ammunition, of course, and you will launch on your enemy. You don't wait for it. Now, if they are not doing this at that level, so what I want to say is that it's possible that the vehicle, we need another category here, which is dugout structure, something like that.
Yes, I was just going to suggest that's exactly what we're missing. But then it's difficult to know what are successful strikes and not successful for dugouts, because actually
that is something that I'm not very interested in, and because we are not discussing the effectiveness of the weapon, but the usage, because the usage will tell us how much.
Not quite, because actually with the December figures, for example, those are successful hits, and it doesn't take into account all the other hits. But if you are then counting just drones sent at a trench, then actually that's not a like-for-like comparison. So I don't know if that would work.
No, you are right. I understand what you mean, because it's different a trench from a tank. But the main issue is that the problem is that when is the source the problem? Because the source is a video that often you don't know if a building has been hit other time. You can guess maybe, but probably you are going to be shown just the one that make everything collapse. So if you start, and sometimes it's the same for vehicles. You don't know why that BMP was there, or if it's not moving, it's likely that has been destroyed after something before happened.
Yeah.
So how you consider that? And so when I started this, I said to myself, I don't want to enter in the rabbit hole of discussing efficiency of the weapon, because we don't have first-hand data. We don't have an officer that tell, each date we send 10 drone and 5 hit the target. Because, for example, when I was discussing these on Twitter, a lot of people gave me different numbers. Some people gave me 10%, some people gave me 50%, some 70, some 60. I have to say that most give me between 50 and 70, not lower than that. But I don't know who believe, because that number will be also important in understanding from this figure if these are the successful hit, how many were before, or essentially on the top. But I think I want to use this analysis to extrapolate a trend that can somehow tell us who has more of who has more and who is using more. And this is something that we may be efficiently extract from Andrew's data. And but again, in terms of efficiency of the weapon, we don't have direct data from the military, of course. So it's very, very a more academic discussion at that point. It's like, oh well, I see these more like that. It's a speculation, I think.
We have a question from a couple of viewers, some questions, and I want to pull them up now. So the first one is from Calendon. Do we have an idea on how much help Russia is getting from China with respect to FPV drones? And Andrew, do you know this, or anyone?
Well, in terms of FPV drone, most of the components that I mount are made in China. So somehow they are getting access to these drones, to these components. But in the same way, because these are dual use components, I mean, this is a very, you can buy these on Amazon right now if you want. So how actively the Chinese government is pushing component to their side is again is debatable. But what is interesting is that we are seeing drone produced in China, and that thread that you showed me a few days ago is the first sign of something made outside Russia in China for Russia. That is a direct help, and that is not concerning by the fact that it is a first. We will see more. It was just a case. Is the quality so bad that they will not order more? We don't know. We will see. We will see with the data that Andrew will fire to us. I think personally that the European Union should do something, not in terms of sanction, but in terms to help in the production of FPV drone.
Yeah, I mean, Ukraine has been asking for help for a while. I mean, I don't know if it's like the Ukrainian government, but people who have been manufacturing the drones have been asking for help. I know that there are groups of people helping them. There are. I'm afraid to get into detail, but I know that there are groups helping them. But I wish. I'm not going to say what the groups are. I know, like, I'm trying to avoid detail, but the people helping them are what I would consider a medium-sized company helping them, whereas I wish we had a government-sized entity helping them, if you know what I mean. So, like, because we're really not talking about that much money. I did some math on it, and it's about $2 billion is what Ukraine needs to complete their drone program. If you gave them $2 billion right now, that they would have all the drones they need for the rest of the year. That is a reasonably small amount of money.
Someone should ask Elon Musk. I'm sure he'll be up for it.
We could easily give Ukraine $2 billion. We give Ukraine a lot more than $2 billion all the time. Like, the EU is debating on giving them $50 billion. You know what I mean? Like, we could give $2 billion towards drones. Like, it's something we can do. Like, this isn't something that costs like $100 billion or something like that. It's just two. And what they need is quantity, and not just quantity. They need to be able to put out the purchase orders to attract entities that can manufacture them efficiently. And
Yeah, by the way, this video is the drones you were talking about, Daniele. So they are aluminium stamped frames. And can you kind of comment on what that means?
Yeah, this would be the first thing that I would do if I have zero knowledge in composite and I need to do something fast. And I mean, we used to produce a receiver of rifle with stamping. It's cheap, it's easy, and costs very much nothing. Of course, weight a ton. But the problem is that you are doing this because you want then to have a more resistant and stiff structure to use a bigger motor, or it's just because, I mean, this is what they can get. This is still something that we don't know. And of course, without having those drones on my desk, I can't say much more. But for example, many people were very concerned about the serial number. I'm very less concerned about the serial number, because the way on how these drones are integrated and the way on how, when I say integrated, I mean assembled, is not going to follow any standard probably that we are used to associate with serial number. Because normally when you have a weapon system or a complex system, that has a serial number, because each serial number has a series of components, has like a list of stuff that went into it. Each operator, you know exactly the history of the construction of that item. And I don't think these drones have been produced at this level of sophistication, honestly. So it's very likely that those serial numbers are needed just to count them and ask them for the proper amount of money.
Erlen, that's a really interesting article. So I've just found it online while you guys are talking, and it's really interesting when Russian propaganda doesn't really help their cause. So on the one hand, this sounds absolutely brilliant for the Russians. So an Izvestia report said, or at least some commanders have said, that they only 10% of Ukrainian FPV drones reach their target. Well, if that's the case, then Ukraine must have an absolute bucket load of drones, because if Daniele's stats and Andrew's stats are correct, and that is video evidence, and you are getting those figures, and those figures only represent 10% of the drones, then actually Ukraine have way more drones than you would think. And I don't know, sometimes the Russians say things and it can be a bit of an own goal.
Yeah, that's interesting. I need to read the article later, but yeah, good example. We got another question I want to put up before we move ahead, and it's we hear about ammunition shortage, like shells and mortars. Is there also a shortage of HE munitions for FPV drones? I guess munitions in general that is possible to use with FPV drones. And I know, Andrew, you talked about the Ukrainians having problems with fuses as well.
Yeah, their fuses applies to the dropped bombs from like the quad drones dropping things. So there's a real shortage of fuses. It's why Ukraine breaks open the DPICM shells. They don't actually want the cluster munition part. They just want the fuse, because the fuse is like pretty decent. So Ukraine has just a shortage of fuses, and a fuse is unfortunately difficult to design a safe fuse that works reliably. So that's an issue that Ukraine has. With the FPV drones, it's a little different because you're using a RPG round as your primary thing, or else you can use plastic explosive, which is pretty plentiful. So with an FPV like kamikaze type drone, they probably don't have an ammo shortage, although the unfortunate thing is that there's no mass-produced, purpose-built munition, and that is a real issue that's I wish someone would address, but it seems like no one really feels like it. You'd need a government to do that. Ideally, the Ukrainian government, but the Ukrainian government doesn't appear to have any interest in doing that. So it would also be nice if like the American government did it, but the American government doesn't want to either. So I'm not really sure how you deal with that. I know that the United States also doesn't have munitions for their own drones, which is amusing. So let alone drones for Ukraine. So yeah, this is just an issue. There's no these weapons are so new that there's no purpose-built munition for them.
I seem to remember that much earlier on when we first started seeing our RPG warheads strapped to FPV drones, that there was, I can't remember, I could be pulling this out of my posterior, but it was something like they had 10,000 warheads, RPG warheads in Ukraine. But of course, that's going to be the sort of munition that will be readily available around the world, and you should be able to secure quite a lot of those. I would have thought from a number of places, you know, historically, there's just been a shed load of those built. So I don't know whether there'd be a shortage of them, although there must be absolutely chomping through the stockpiles of those.
I imagine so. Yeah, there's so many RPGs out there. I believe they manufactured like 10 million warheads or something like that, like the Soviet Union. So there are so many. Like, and also you don't have to use one of those warheads. The warheads are good because there's a shaped charge; it can go through armor. But if you're not hitting armor, you can just use like plastic explosives. A lot of Russian drones are just like a big block of plastic explosives attached to the drone, and it makes just a gigantic explosion, just huge explosions, and they're pretty deadly. So you don't have to use the RPG warhead. The RPG warhead is just convenient because it's like a decent enough shape to work with, you know, and it has a shaped charge.
I wanted to mention that recently I saw a video of a Ukrainian FPV drone. I can't show that video here because we would get banned immediately from YouTube. But where a Ukrainian FPV drone detonates mid-air, and it certainly has some sort of fragmentation round on it. And is that something you've seen more frequently lately?
Ukraine has been doing it pretty infrequently, but they've been doing it for a while. They started doing this during their counteroffensive in the summer. I've only seen like a handful of videos of them doing it, though.
The Australian cardboard drone there was footage of them, you know, one of their, I guess, advertising, if you like, videos had them trialing out airburst munitions from those. So, you know, so when I talked about that video, someone was saying that could be one of the Australian ones, but we haven't really heard too much about them for some time.
Yeah, I haven't seen too much of that either. But yeah, the airburst drones, they came from a period of time of experimentation. And at the time, Ukraine was looking at dive bombers and airburst drones. These were FPVs, so dive bomber FPVs and dive bomber airburst. The dive bombers, they managed to destroy a lot of tanks and BMPs with dive bombers. It was actually very impressive. Madhyar was doing a bunch of that with his group. You could go back and watch those videos if you want. He was also doing level bombing with what's it called? Not a Predator. I always call it a Predator. It's not called a Predator. Whatever. With their level bomber drone, they took out a bunch of vehicles with that thing too. They don't use that much anymore though. But yeah, the airburst drones were an experiment. I would assume the experiment failed. In that they don't use it very much, but they do use it from time to time. It is an option. It's like a tool in the toolbox, but it's just not used very often. I'm not sure why. There could be all sorts of reasons why it doesn't work. It could just be unreliable. Like when you click the button, it might not explode. That would, after when that happens a few times, you get frustrated. You don't want to deal with it anymore. You know, things like that. Like who knows? But the dive bombers are still used, not as much anymore, and I don't see them using them on vehicles anymore, which is weird because they did destroy a lot of vehicles with dive bombers, but now they use them more on infantry. I believe the 82nd Brigade, their drone guys, used a whole bunch of dive bombers when they were attacking Verbova, and Madhyar was using a whole bunch when they were attacking Staromayorsk. So, but yeah, the dive bombers are still there. The airbursts are still there. They're just not as common.
Okay, I think we have to let Germinate do his news report now, and then we could sum up with some questions after that news report. What do you think?
Just by the way, in case you want to share this, I've just shared privately a video of that cardboard drone doing airburst, just in case you wanted to show viewers at all.
We can do that. It's not gonna get us banned, right?
No, it's just on a box. This is what I was talking about. This is like kind of their promo video. So that I mean, that's the capability, but I don't know. Apparently they did strike some airplanes, didn't they? In one of the Russian bases is one of the theories that they use these to do that. But you can see it exploding above and airbursting below. But I don't think I've seen these. They probably used them up really quickly once they got them from Australia, and I don't know if they've had many more.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. Germinate, are you ready?
No, I'm not right now. I'm joking. Of course, I'm ready. Just want to say, if you want to finish the questions first, I'm happy to wait like 10-15 minutes more. So I don't really mind.
Well, if we do your segment now, and then we can do, some of the questions from also your segment, because you're probably gonna get some.
No, I don't think so. But yeah, sure. Let's go ahead. So there hasn't been going on much this week. So this will be a shorter update this time. We are directly starting on Thursday, according to various media reports, based on a letter to Rheinmetall and KMW from Sebastian Schäfer, who is part of the budget committee in the German Bundestag. The repair of Ukrainian Stritzwagen 122 and Leopard 2A6 in the maintenance center in Lithuania is taking very long because, according to the local industry, there's a lack of spare parts. He writes, there is an urgent need for action. He also notes that repair attempts by the AFU have led to further damage to the tanks. 2 days later, Rheinmetall told Der Spiegel that a comprehensive spare parts package for the Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks was already ordered by the German government in December 2023. A contract has also been signed between the maintenance center operated by Rheinmetall and KMW and the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense to improve the supply of spare parts both in Ukraine and Lithuania. His reports reminds me personally of the fact that Ukraine has been saying for many, many months now that they don't have enough spare parts for weapon systems and vehicles delivered by Germany. Of course, it will be only possible to say in a few months' time to what extent the situation has really improved as a result of this newly concluded contract. On Wednesday, the government spokesperson Steffen Hebestreit said that Germany has delivered what is possible in terms of air defense, that the limiting factor is in production, and talks are underway with other governments to put their orders on hold so that Ukraine can be supplied first. As far as production is concerned, I can say that in terms of air defense, the production capacities are currently 1 to 1.5 TRML-4D air surveillance radars per month, more than 4 IRIS-T SLM systems per year, and about 500 IRIS-T and IRIS-T SL missiles per year. As far as talks with foreign governments are concerned, he is certainly talking about governments that have ordered IRIS-T SLM systems via the European Sky Shield initiative. Regarding the success he's talking about, for example, the first Ukrainian IRIS-T SLM system, and I believe the second, was intended for Egypt, which is why it can be seen in Ukraine with a special sand camo. Only the third IRIS-T SLM system delivered by Germany is in a green color. On Tuesday, the German government updated the list of military assistance to Ukraine after 2 weeks and made public that they have delivered the following to Ukraine: 10 Marder 1A3 IFVs, up to 120 IRIS-T SL missiles, 1 Skynex air defense system, 2 TRML-4DA surveillance radars, 30 drone detection sensors, 1 bridge-laying tank Biber, 3 HX-81 tank transporters and 1 extra semi-trailer, 10 Mercedes-Benz Zetros, 2 Vs and 1 MC mine-clearing tanks, 34 regular vehicles, which could be Toyota Land Cruisers, more than 9,155 artillery shells, ammunition for the Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks, 3,350 combat helmets, 10 ground surveillance radars Ground Observer 12, 305 MK556 rifles, 750,000 rounds of firearm ammunition, 1,152 winter camouflage nets, and 2,000 winter camouflage ponchos. Apart from the already known assistance, which was announced earlier last year, 41 Mercedes-Benz trucks of unknown type, 26,850 combat helmets, and 4,695 MK556 rifles and 450,000 rounds of fire ammunition were added to the pledged assistance. On Friday, the UNICEF in Ukraine published images on Twitter and made public that Germany's Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development has co-financed, if not fully financed, sorry, I was talking German for some reason. I don't know. Financed 7 diesel generators via the state-owned Investment and Development Bank, which were donated to the water utility in Kyiv to help ensure access to safe water for around 220,000 people. And as the last item of this week, also on Friday, I reported that as of the 1st of January 2024, Deere Defense took over Allweier, a manufacturer for precision parts in Germany. Through the takeover, Deere is increasing the production capacity and opens up a new source of supply of parts for the existing product range, such as missiles like the IRIS-T or IRIS-T-SL, for the IRIS-T-SLS launchers or IRIS-T-SLM systems delivered by Germany to Ukraine. And that's basically the summary of this week's German aid to Ukraine. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is super valuable information, and I'm so grateful that you're part of our team, German Aid. Yeah, I see people commenting German Aid all the time, and I'm. If you didn't have your Twitter channel and your webpage, I think Germany would have been in a lot more heat, and also wouldn't have gotten that much positivity. So I think it's really valuable work that you do.
He should be paid by the German government because the man is awesome. I mean, his website is just brilliant as well. So the list is phenomenal and the blog is great. I mean, if I had more time, which I desperately need, I'd be spending a lot of time around his place. So it's awesome.
And he makes it himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you coded it yourself, didn't you?
Yeah. Currently coding another version of the website since I believe like 2 or 3 months. Yeah,
I'm going to write to Olaf Scholz and get you a check in the post.
Go ahead, please do that.
One man army. So I got one question, and I think Colby could answer. It's from Kellen Dunn, or we got a question. On a related topic, I heard that Russia is adding cluster munitions in its ballistic missiles. Have you seen evidence of this? So Colby.
That's nothing new. There are cluster munition payloads that exist for Iskander and possibly Tochka as well. I don't know how prevalent those actually might be on the battlefield. Perhaps Andrew or some of the other guys that do a lot of the geolocation have some information about that, but they definitely exist. So that wouldn't be a new capability that's just coming online. That is something that has always existed for Iskander, is some sort of cluster munition payload.
Yeah, they've been using the Iskander with cluster munitions for a while. I remember Ukraine managed to shoot one down over Zaporizhia, which is doesn't happen often. But when it crashed, it just released all the little canisters of cluster munitions on the street, and there's a lot of photos and videos of that. So, and I just like to say that as we've been talking over the past 10 minutes or so, Kharkiv has been getting bombarded by S-300 missiles. So just keep that in mind.
Oh, yeah. It tends to happen while we stream this shit, isn't it? Adam Bennett came with a related question to the German aid, actually. Is Skynet superior to other equipment? And I guess what could we relate it to? We could relate it to basically people with AKs shooting up in the sky, and also people using Stinger missiles or other shoulder-fired anti-air missiles, manpads. We could relate it to the Gepard.
Or the older ZU sort of autocannons.
Yes. I don't know who is best to answer this question in the panel.
So I would take on, if somebody wants to add something about it, of course you can.
Go ahead.
But I would say that Skynex, not Skynet, Skynex is
Of course, it's not
probably.
Skynet. I hope
Yeah,
it's not.
I mean, it's a network, so it's fine. It's probably the most modern, and I would also say the most effective weapon system Ukraine currently has to deal with threats like drones for close range protection. Yeah, what is to say about it? You can probably imagine it like 4 Gepards at the same time, and just less maneuverable, less armored, but way more advanced and more modern. Yeah, really don't know what to say about it. It's really basically like a Gepard, just a full-blown air defense system, cannon-based, not missile-based.
Is it automated? So, like, will it target the drone itself and shoot itself, or can it do both? Or
so the whole system needs about like 4 people to operate, and you still have to give the fire okay. So it automatically tracks, and it when you press a button, basically it shoots automatically and tracks the drone and stuff like this. So it's very, very modern, and it's very, very effective. It doesn't work like fully automatically, but as much as you probably can go.
So I guess I want to ask Colby, because a related thing is the availability of air defense missiles and how that is going to affect Ukraine in the coming time. What are the alternatives for Ukraine when it's going to be more difficult to get it from the US?
So Ukraine's, as far as air defense missiles, what are Ukraine's main systems right now? NASAMS is obviously one of the big ones. IRIS-T is one of the big ones. IRIS-T missiles obviously are only coming from Germany. There's no other production source, and German aid to Ukraine has highlighted the work that Diehl is doing to increase production capacity there, which is good, but it's a single source, so that's kind of problematic, and there's a limited number of other countries that are operating those missiles that could possibly donate them, and again, that's a finite supply, because once their own stocks are gone, they're gone. So that's a challenge. For NASAMS, it's better because NASAMS uses AMRAAM, and there's quite a few AMRAAMs that are available from lots of different donor countries, and AMRAAM production is a lot healthier. But again, if they're not coming directly from the United States, then there's challenges there, because we're talking about what are the different stocks of different countries, and then what could be ordered in addition to that. And there's already quite a few orders of new AMRAAM missiles for Ukraine, so placing more orders doesn't help them in the short term. So the unfortunate reality is really just the United States has the deepest stockpiles of all of these munitions, and if they are not continuing to draw down those inventories, then Ukraine is going to have quite a significant crunch of munitions, which is why it was so important for Europe right at the beginning of the war to really start making big investments into their own production capacity for a whole range of different things. Because even whether the United States is going to be continuing aid or not, Europe just needs to be more self-sufficient in this regard. And we have seen that while there's been some good progress, Europe overall is still just really not where it needs to be. There's not nearly enough investments being made, and things just are not happening quickly enough. So it's not great. And if the United States isn't going to continue military aid, then Ukraine is going to be in a pretty bad situation pretty quickly.
Colby, who do you think the European nations that are lagging behind are? Because I get the impression that Germany really is starting to step up, or has been for some time. It's interesting to hear Giorgia Meloni recently talk about the need to do this from Italy, and Italy's a big player in terms of GDP and economy. France has got a massive defense industrial military complex. It's the second biggest exporter in the world, because I wouldn't put Russia in second place anymore. So who is failing the most in terms of the big players?
Yeah, good question. So I mean, Erlen could tell you about Norway, and there's good things that are happening in Norway, but there's also still definitely a lack of investment in NAMO in particular, I would say, who are the ones that are making most of the ammunition, the non-missile ammunition,
Yes.
all the small arms, the small and medium caliber, and the large caliber artillery ammunition, all that comes from NAMO. And NAMO doesn't seem to have had much in the way of investment in their production capacity. In fact, most of it is actually happening in Finland, where their Lapua subsidiary, there's a lot of stuff going on there because the Finnish government has been kind of pushing that. But Norway obviously has a lot of money. It's a prosperous country, but NAMO is really not getting the kind of investments, and their production increase forecasts are not even what their counterparts at Kongsberg are doing with increasing missile production. And Erlen can expand on this further afterwards if he wants. So NAMO is a problem, I would say. Nexter is a problem. KNDS in France, I mean, they're expanding as well, but the scope of the expansion is still relatively modest. They can and should be doing a lot more. I give full credit to the United Kingdom and France for providing long-range strike missiles, Storm Shadow, Scalp-EG, to Ukraine, but France has not done anything, as far as we can see, to restart production of new Scalp-EG missiles, which is something that they should have done pretty much immediately. And other countries in Europe should have looked at ordering them for themselves as well. But this is like the single biggest failing of Europe. And
is that the failure of the governments rather than the manufacturers?
Yeah, the governments have to place orders, because no manufacturer is just going to build things without orders. It's not how it works. Like, there's no supermarket for military equipment where companies are going to bother building things and then wait and see if somebody wants to buy it. It's just fundamentally the way the industry works. And the European defense industry has been pretty clear, and lots of defense industries around the world, the Canadian defense industry is the same story, where they're saying, like, listen, we can invest in production capacity, but we need to have orders. Like, we're not going to put our own.
We can make money. We're happy to make money. You just need to pay us.
Yeah. Yes, precisely. And they know that, they can make money. They see that there's value in it, but if there's no orders, just in a market economy, you can't raise capital if there's no prospects for generating future revenue. And that's the problem, is that the governments don't want to place these big orders, long-term predictable orders that would support building new factories, because that's really what needs to happen.
Why is that?
Why is that? I don't know. I mean, it depends on the country. Different governments may have different reasons for why they don't want to, and they are, for the most part, doing it to some degree. It's just not happening on the same scale. And even in the United States, more should be being done than currently is. The United States has put a lot of money into expanding production capacity, but not as much as it probably needs to if we actually want Ukraine to really win the war. The United States is building one new plant from scratch when really they should probably be building 2 or maybe even 3 new plants from scratch. So there's still a big collective problem here. Just one of the last countries I'll mention is Italy. Italy, we really don't know what's going on because Italy is quite secretive about what they are providing to Ukraine, which is fine, I guess. I mean, countries, it's their prerogative whether they want to disclose what they're doing or not. But it, just from an accountability perspective, it makes it difficult to kind of track who's doing what. And Italy, I assess, is providing a fair bit to Ukraine, but I don't know what is happening in terms of, are they expanding their own production capacity? Because Rheinmetall has a facility in Italy that's doing ammo production, and Italy as well has some state-owned facilities as well, and that's a huge mystery. I have no idea what's happening at the state-owned facilities in Italy. So Meloni's comments are always encouraging, but we don't know whether the Italian government has actually put any money where their mouth is on expanding their own capacity at their state-owned facilities.
Yeah, so I can quickly comment on Norway, and I really didn't want to do this, but I couldn't find any tweets in English that wasn't mine. So I don't like this at all. But yeah,
promotion is good.
So basically, what is interesting here is that Nammo says that they're only one of 4 major ammunition producers in Europe. This is just about 155, with a market share about 20 to 25% of the European market. This was in a letter to the Norwegian Parliament after inquiries, by the way. And then they also gave pretty extensive analysis over the whole European market and the manufacturing capability. This is really concerning. European industry can cover only 5 to 10% of the short-term demand. That means the total demand, not only to Ukraine, but every order on the books of these factories. European capacity is estimated to be at max 500,000 shells per year, and this was mid-autumn. So I estimate that this is going to be quite a bit higher next year especially because of the investments in Rheinmetall in Spain, etc. So what the problem with Nammo is that the government seemed to be very reluctant in the beginning to just transfer money to Nammo, because they asked for something like 70-80 million euros to be able to double their production capacity when the war broke out. They immediately asked the government for more money. What happened was that it was a very, very long bureaucratic process that ended in a very large contract awarded by the Norwegian government that should cover these costs over the long term. And this sounds to me like some I don't want to use bad words, but some person in the finance department was way too involved in this decision-making process, and they didn't look at what the effect would be if the government invests this money right now, and the return would be not just economically from investments and more orders being possible to fulfill for Nammo, but also to actually stop the war as soon as possible, so enable Ukraine to win and beat back the Russians as fast as possible. And I think the finance department guys, they fell into some black hole of numbers that, unfortunately dragged this out way too long. And then the whole EU program came, and then the Norwegian government said, okay, we're gonna aim for this now. And that's been dragging out. And the latest news is that the Norwegian government said, the Minister of Defense said that they're waiting for an answer from the EU program that was supposed to enable the 1 million shells for Ukraine, the famous 1 million shells. And they're going to get the answer sometime in February, which means when the month after these shells were supposed to be delivered, the deadline for that's when, the 1 more month before that, that's when Nammo is getting the answer from the EU. But in the meantime, the Norwegian government should have just funded the factory, of course, and made those shells as quick as possible. And doubling the production line would certainly be good. And that's what Finland does in their Nammo factory. So that's what I know about that topic. And I guess Daniele has more insights about both the UK and Italy when it comes to production there.
Yeah, and I would like to start probably with the good news rather than, bad news, because Italy is not doing very well at all. But the good news is that at least BAE in UK has been, since the start of the war, very well on the tip of the spear, because essentially they got immediately 480 million pound just in the middle of March, something like that, from the government in order to increase the production in general. And they used, I have done a presentation on these some time ago. Yes. So 280 million over the 480 given went immediately to Washington plant, which is producing 155, 105, 120 millimeter and tank round, and also the 81 millimeter mortar bomb, and also 40 millimeter and I think 30 millimeter round for IF3s. So this money went immediately into this plant, which is very, very big, is one of the biggest in Europe, and they immediately essentially ramp up the assumption, the employee level. After this, BAE was awarded of 1.5 billion contract for the next 10 years for the replenishing UK stocks and developing new ammunition and improve production level. And just in July, they were awarded another 280 million pound for production on only 155 millimeter. And these bring their employees at Washington from the initial 340 to around 600. They increased the capacity of filling station down in Scotland in Wales, where they have the filling station, and essentially everything from that point of view of investment is very, very good. Then there are other issues, of course, but are all more technical rather than political. So the money have been placed, probably maybe more will come, but BAE in UK is doing well, technical issues aside. And the black sheep in all this is Italy, because Italy has a very long heritage of very good and sustained production, especially during the Cold War. And the biggest plant that they have is in Sardinia, where they have quite substantially large plant, small compared to UK or even Scranton, which are essentially, for me, like how big should be a factory doing 155 or artillery shell, essentially. And these factories at the moment are not producing new ammunition, at least at the level they could. They are more concentrated on refurbishing the artillery shell that have been past the date, essentially. So they are emptying and refilling the artillery shells. And this is mainly what they are doing. And unfortunately, Italy has been struck by a lot of protests in the previous year ahead of this invasion, and the plan were in around 2014 of double the capacity of, because this was a Rheinmetall owned plant at the time in Sardinia. They want to double the capacity, and this was essentially stopped by local committees for peace and also for environmental control. And so the plant has not been seen at the same level of update of many other plants around the world. So unless the politics, the Giorgia Meloni, but in general, Italy is a bit complex because it's not like a presidential democracy. Is a republic, is a parliamentary one. So every time the prime minister say that he want to do something, he have to go to the parliament and get the votes. And unfortunately, there is a lot of division inside the government, even So unless there is a strong commitment, even in making compromise and making these things to work, I see very unlikely Italy for now stepping a lot on ammunition production, which is really, really bad, because I think France, Spain, and Italy are the bigger missing here. They really could help a lot Germany, which is ramping up. We are working with the German aid in tracking these. They are doing well. There is an increase. I know that sometimes Germany buy from other producer, but in general they are doing well. I mean, they're very committed. I'm sure they will fulfill their 200,000 shell pledged. I'm sure 100%.
This is an inflection point in history where Germany become the heroes of Europe and can, you know, just change cultural appreciation of Germany in so many interesting ways. I mean, I'm sure historians will look back on this time as being an important period for so many reasons.
Yeah. Honestly, I was one of. I admit I was very much a boo of Scholz. I'm still sometimes, but now I appreciate much more, because I know what is coming, and I know the level and the commitment, and I see also the problem for different reason. I see the problem in artillery production in terms of ammunition. So Germany is not doing bad respect to many other countries. I mean, Nextar and France are doing much worse, in my opinion. Is a technical opinion. I mean, but I think is also fair, and this goes also against all these people that say, because we are doing bad, Russia is strong. No, we are doing bad because we have come from 20 years where we had a different threat, and we need to be honest and say, okay, the government have to take decision and put money on programs thinking on the next threat. And the next threat in the last 20 years were terrorists, and not high intensity war with a peer adversary, of course. So we are back and behind also because we didn't the correct investment on some side. On the others, we see MRAP, we see armored vehicle, we see mine and blast resistant vehicle saving the life of a Ukrainian soldier. And this is also because we did the investment in research in order to protect our troop in other type of conflict. So sometimes we need just to be more understandable also the situation and about the historical context.
I have another question that is German aid related, which I think is very interesting. There are a lot of little and middle companies in the technical domain in Germany, a strength of Germany for decades. Why don't we see more of those involved in the production of military material? And that's something I've heard from you many times, Daniele. Like, we should just set up shop in our garage and make shells for Ukraine.
Oh my God.
But it's not exactly in the same category. But could these small middle companies in some way enhance the production of at least some components and parts for the effort?
I mean, you see that I sent just because I was thinking that the German aid will reply, and then I say, can I follow up over this, because this is my constant feeling that we are not doing something like this, because I think on some extent, yes. For example, FPV production, or if we can help industries in some of their manufacturing process, like machining, like checking, so try to step more to a war economy. Of course, we are not in a direct war, but a few months ago, a year ago now, we all cheered about the fireworks factory exploded in Moscow, and then that revealed that probably was or was not. We will never know. But essentially, another factory which was producing optics and very high precision machining tools and manufacture for a military. They were machining shells. they were doing a part, or probably the last part of the production on artillery shell. And many people were smiling and laughing at this, but I was saying no, that's exactly what you want to do if your military industry is in difficulties. You rely on the best industries, civil industries that you have, and this is honestly a smart move, and something that probably we should start to think. And now I leave to German aid, because he probably knows much better the small industries sector of Germany, but I believe that is very good respect to Moscow and Russia in general.
So first of all, thanks for the question. I also think that's a very interesting question to answer. I think that comes down to how you see how big are little or middle companies, because Germany is a very strong company in terms of the defense sector. Even our like smaller companies having like international customers and delivering a lot of stuff to this country. So I would probably say the smallest company which is providing aid to Ukraine in after contracts from the German government is probably like Quantum Systems, who are delivering the Vector UAVs to Ukraine. One of these drones costs like 180,000 euros, and they have delivered 162 of them. But apart from that, like Germany is very involved in air defense and armored vehicles and ammunition, and this is like the main domain of very big companies like Rheinmetall or KMW and or Deal Defense, Hensoldt, and so there are not a lot of little or middle companies in it, and where companies with not a few workers could be involved, like drones, they are involved, at least in my opinion. But everything else is like the main domain of course, of big companies, and yeah.
Thank you. Daniele, I know you had some something you wanted to show us before we end the stream.
Yeah, this is very small, and there are two things that I want to show you all. And the first is how it looks like the database of Andrew. So just let me just to share with you the complexity of this. Okay, so let me see. Okay, you should see something.
Yep.
So this is the database, and you can see how long and how many rows there are. And you can see it's categorized by date, different indicator, icons, coordinates, title, description, text file. So this I'm opening this. I saved this as a CSV file, and then I'm using like a tool of VS Code, which is called CSV Rainbow, which allows you to divide in categories, so you can easily navigate and see through it. You can see how big it is, how many details there are, how many. Of course, you see sometimes you have better description, sometimes not, but mostly is huge, immense.
But
so
I want to note that there is a link to the source for
yes, this
the
one.
entries in all of the entries, right?
Yeah, everyone. I think essentially everyone has otherwise it's not there. I mean, yeah, you see, for example, this is one of the things that Andrew was discussing last time. You see, this one is one of those cases where Andrew, because Andrew is the one that does this most often, is essentially taking one video and sectioning it. So this was one video, probably 4945. So this was one video, but you can see how many attack it contains. So essentially, this means that if you don't do this, you will count as an one single attack, but look how many has been. So for this reason, the work that Andrew does is very intensive and very, very, very difficult, because sometimes you have so many things to analyze that time consuming. And sometimes you don't have even the possibility to geolocate, so you don't have geolocation, but most of them have. For example, now I'm encoding. I essentially spoiled you what I was doing. I was trying to essentially visualize the attack. These are Ukrainian attack that for which I have a geolocation. So they are absolutely not all of them, and I'm trying to put on a map. Now I'm using Python. I'm using Jupyter Notebook, because these in future we can host on a website. Anyone can read about. You can see the code is quite easy, but the problem is accessing to the data. So there are other part of the code that allow me to section essentially little bits the database. For example, in this case, you can see I selected only blue drones with date and with a certain geolocation, and these are on infantry, these are on vehicles, and there is also other type of filtering that I apply. For example, I exclude duplicated videos, because Andrew load everything, and if it's duplicated, it will tell you. So you can definitely understand if a video on any side has been duplicated. And so this code essentially arrange the attack on a map, which I found is very interesting, because once this is fully developed, we can have a very detailed description of where the attack were done. Now, at this point, I'm plotting all at once. My aim for next week is understand and learn how to have like a cursor here or somewhere, like in order to move it across like date, so you can see them pop up in an additive way. So this would help us also to understand the level of destruction that we see, for example, from other footages in the same areas, to understand how the FPV drone has been used. And just to give you another hint here, going back to the data from, if I just search for trench, you can see that this is also very well indicated. So I will, for example, I will be able to instruct the code to look for keyword trench and select this data. And of course, I have to verify that I selected all, if I didn't select it twice. So it's a lengthy process, but the end result is those data that I show in that thread. And you can't do this by hand, because it's simply impossible. I mean, it's a waste of time, and it's really impossible. I don't know even how this amount of data has been constructed in such a consistent and nice way. And this was just to give you a glimpse of what means creating a database, keeping it updated, and also use it, because it's not just you select something and then it's done. Even when I select the data, I have to verify that everything has been, for example, one of the problem now that I have is that some doesn't have a geolocation in numbers, so has a name. So probably I will have to run a code that reads this name, inform me about this, and then I just replace it for the Solidar. I will put like the coordinate of Solidar from Google. So in this way, I will have like a consistent database. And that's it. I mean,
thank you. And I want to say thank you to Jonathan for joining us. It was an absolute fantastic to have you on the stream. We got a lot of good questions from you, and I think from the audience as well, because of your presence there. So this was really good. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me, and I likewise return that invitation to any of you. I know German Aid from Ukraine has been on my channel twice, but please feel free to come on my channel, and you can self publicize and shout about your work, and you can mirror any content on your own channel. So any of you are welcome on mine. Please feel free.
Thank you. We will follow you up on that. And I'm gonna give the word back to our in-house Jonathan for the outro. I think you have a picture of the week, yeah?
Thank you. Yes, we've had thank you to our panel for your time, informative discussion. We've had a shed load of comments today, people, so please do keep submitting them in the usual way, via DM or replying to a post on X, or visit our website. We are going to close with Picture of the Week, which for our Spotify and Apple podcast listeners, we will describe before displaying it. Everything, once said author Viktor Frankl, can be taken from a human being, except the choice to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Words evoke from the pictures this week of Ukrainian POWs, Azovstal veterans, border guards, veterans of the 2022 defense of Ukraine and before. Pictures of men with faces gaunt, their hands bone cold, the eyes which bear their stories testaments to the Russian culture, which first invaded their country 9 years, 10 months ago. Brothers, fathers, husbands, or partners. This is Tochny's Picture of the Week. Thank you to everybody who has joined us. Please join us for our next episode, which will be rather soon. Take care. Slava Ukraini.
Heroям слава.
Heroям slava.
On behalf of the brave.